You are live. That means we're live. Hello, hello. Welcome to Behind the Scenes of AV Rant, episode number 665. We are doing our live recording session right here. So, yes, this is just going out live. That means there might be, audio glitches. We're just using Skype to talk to each other and streaming this out live over the YouTubes. So, there is a completed video version with cleaned up audio that I put out later in the week. And,
holy crap, this Derek question is like 2 pages. Solid
it's a
text.
lot of...
There's not even an A, B, or C.
No,
it's just one massive
thing,
question.
But it's all the details.
Jeez, oh, criminy.
You get to read. Or I say it's early on, so it's before you're all tired out and the eyes are tired.
I can mess up. I can mess up right away, Rob. You'd be surprised how quickly I can mess up. I'm good at it. I'm like an expert.
Well, with all that, I think we're ready to go.
Over halfway down our question list, we get to question 4.
That's how it goes sometimes. There's pictures in there taking up room.
It's not that many pictures.
But there's pictures and taking up room.
I'm very
multi-questions. I didn't shrink the pictures as much as I normally do. Yeah.
Okay. Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm
Rob
here with...
H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. My tooth is fixed. That was good because it was Thanksgiving yesterday. I'm full of turkey and pumpkin pie. So happy Thanksgiving, Canadians.
Why do you guys eat turkey too on Thanksgiving? Are you copying us or what?
I have no idea who's came first, but we celebrate ours earlier in the year, so I'll say us.
No, that's not how that works.
It's exactly how that works.
I don't actually like turkey. I often eat turkey at Thanksgiving, but I almost never cook it myself. If I cook, it's going to be a standing rib roast or a lamb of some sort.
Is
I like lamb.
Ham the other traditional Thanksgiving thing? If not,
my wife was raised in a half Muslim household, so she doesn't. I mean, she'll eat the crap out of some bacon, but she doesn't want. She doesn't want like just pork by itself, or she doesn't want bacon in her stuff. Like she doesn't want a bacon cheeseburger. She wants bacon and a cheeseburger. She doesn't want it together, which I find weird. But I mean, whatever. That's fine, and I can understand too. I wasn't really raised. We didn't eat that much fish, mostly because we were poor, but also because I guess we just didn't. But I didn't grow up eating fish. I don't really eat fish all that much. I mind it. I just don't ever order it, almost ever, ever, unless it's tuna. I really like tuna. That's like the baby bottle of fish. Anybody can do that. All right, this is AV Rant Podcast, can answer your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You go to www.avrant.com and leave us a comment there, facebook.com/AVRantPodcast. You can watch our recording sessions live and, I guess, post-production on youtube.com/AVRant. You want to contact us directly, it's rob@avrant.com. His Twitter is @FirstReflect. I'm Tom @avrant.com. My Twitter is @avrant_Tom. I forgot it for a second, but I got it back.
Covered well. You would forget that at this point. Only said it every week for 11 years.
Something like that. It's been a while. Oh.
Wow.
So, I got
Fitbit. Okay, yeah, got to check those steps while you're sitting down and talking.
It doesn't reach from here. No, well, I mean, it tells me I got it mostly just so I can see my text messages. I really don't care about the rest of that nonsense. I was jealous of my wife sitting there, and she's like, "Everybody, put your phones away," and then she'd look at her wrist for a second, and then she put it back down. I'm like, "That's cheating.
Hey, I guess you could get that new Google or not Google, Amazon Loop." Because they couldn't call it Ring because they already bought a company named Ring. So they called their finger ring a loop. So you get that Amazon Loop.
Yeah, what does that do?
It puts She Who Shall Not Be Named on your finger. Because that's what we have all...
Like Sauron's at the Ring of Power?
What we've all dreamt of is having that A-lady on our finger.
Oh, man.
That's right. She can tap you.
I still laugh when people talk about how, they're not going to buy a wiretap for their house. I'm like, Amazon doesn't care.
There are real live people listening, but they also still don't care. They just want to get through their day. They really just want to get through their day.
They really don't care. All right, we want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, you can support the podcast in some way. If you want to support us financially, you can go to patreon.com/AVRant podcast, where you can sign up for a monthly subscription. It's a monthly draw from your bank account where they give most of it to us and keep a little bit for themselves. A minimum is $1, maximum is $1 million, 1,000, trillion,
infinity. Just keep hitting zero. See how far it goes.
So we want to thank our 86 patrons over at patreon.com, including Brian. Brian specifically mentioned that he was a patron, so we want to mention him. If you would like us to mention you, let us know you're a patron.
That's all it takes. Thank you very much to our 86 patrons over there. And we didn't get any this week, but if you just want to make a one-time donation, you don't want it recurring, just come to our website, avrant.com, and over on the right-hand side it says Support AV Rant. There's a picture of a cup of coffee, and that link will just take you to PayPal. So you can hand out a one-time donation via PayPal if you want to, and you don't need a PayPal account. You can just use a credit card without signing up for a PayPal account if you want to do that.
If you can't support us financially, we understand. Just figure out some way to support us and let us know what you did. So one way you can do that is by correcting us, or in this case, letting us know that somebody else's correction was also correct. So Bill confirmed Mike's correction from last week regarding the 20 amp circuits, where we mentioned that if you want to have a 20 amp circuit, you have to have 12 gauge wire in your wall. That is correct. And Bill confirmed that.
Absolutely. Yes. I appreciate that very much. Thank you, Bill. And always welcome corrections. We know we have at least 2 people listening closely in Bill and Mike. It's incontrovertible.
They at least made it for the first 5 minutes of the podcast. All right. Let's see here. This is news. This is news. You'll never guess the official name of Sony's next gaming system. It's the, drum roll please.
What could it be?
PlayStation 5.
Whoa. They did it.
I know. I pegged that, by the way.
So many people got their prediction right. We all won the office pool.
I know. All of us. You know what? Thank you, PlayStation. Thank you, Sony. I very rarely say thank you, Sony, but thank you, Sony, for not coming up with a stupid name for your thing and just version
I did like
5.
that
because what's Xbox One going to do? Is it going to be Xbox One X? I mean, it's going to be something stupid.
Well, some people were pointing out that it should just be like following along the mathematical points on a spiral line. So the next one should be like Xbox minus 1780. Because that's where the next dot should fall on the line on the graph. No, I did like the Onion article where they're like, Microsoft just devastated Sony by announcing the PlayStation 6, the Microsoft PlayStation 6.
That would so fool so many people. It's not even. It is disheartening to think how many people would go out there and go see the Sony PlayStation 5 next to the Xbox PlayStation 6 and buy the Xbox PlayStation 6 and they'd be mad that the game
that's why they went with 360.
God of War doesn't
That's
run
why they
on
went
it.
with 360 for their second system, because they're like, it's going to be up against the PlayStation 3 and we've got to have a 3 in our name.
We're going to be 60 better than that.
We can't be the Xbox 2 or it won't stack up to the PlayStation 3. I don't know. They probably weren't wrong about that.
Yeah. Anyways, it'll launch holiday 2020. So, and Sony has now confirmed it will include an Ultra HD Blu-ray drive, which again shocks nobody, including the ability to play Ultra HD Blu-ray movies.
Well, I mean, the PlayStation 4 Pro couldn't do it, so. Yep.
That's just ridiculous. They introduced a new controller, which looks a lot like the current DualShock 4 for the PS4, but they've replaced the rumble with a full haptic feedback. It has little spikes that shoots out into your fingers whenever you do something wrong. Somebody believes me. I'm sorry, you person.
Tap.
And game developers can now program how much resistance the triggers apply to your fingers. Oh, God, how many broken controllers are we going to have?
Yeah, they want to be able to make sure the trigger of each gun feels, exactly like it does in real life. That's the goal.
That's really terrible. The first residential installation of the in the USA of Samsung's The Wall. I feel like Pink Floyd should have something to say about that, but let's go on. 146-inch micro LED display was completed in Southern California. Samsung factory personnel were on site, and this installation took 3 days. The display requires 20 amp electrical service with 12 gauge wire going all the way back to the panel. And the installation company says they were pleased that the existing structure did not require reinforcement to support the display's weight, which has been decreased since the first prototypes. Dude, how heavy is this thing? I think it was supposed to be that heavy, but whatever. The price was not disclosed, and so if you go to Flickr and see the pictures, or if you're on YouTube and you're seeing them now, you'll notice this very beautiful room, which honestly does not look that much less like a normal flat panel display on a wall.
It's big, though. It's 146 inches.
It is big.
Good luck getting one of those.
So if you're looking for the speakers in this room, take a guess where the custom installers put the speakers.
Because those are some solid-looking walls.
Just take a guess.
Those are some solid-looking, flat, wooden walls.
Wood paneling on the walls, on at least around the TV and on the right wall. Wood paneling everywhere. There's carpet on the floor, and it's a drop tile ceiling. So there is some theoretical absorption in here. But where are the speakers, Rob?
Where could they possibly be when you're dealing with something that was listed in CE Pro? Yeah, they're all in the ceiling. All in the ceiling.
They're every single
all
one
up
of them.
there. Yeah. Because they clearly care about the acoustics in this space, man.
Yeah. If I just want the next time some a-hole custom installer installs all in-ceiling speakers, that he also installs a chair that is like right next to the ceiling. So that your head's like basically touching the ceiling, like this big staircase up to it, like a lifeguard seat, but for sound. Because that's the only way you're going to get a decent surround mix out of this stupid thing. It's just, why? That TV's probably what, $150,000 or something like that.
Way more than that. It's way more than.
You can't get decent speakers in here. You can't get a decent speaker layout. I mean, it disgusts me that somebody would have so much money to spend on the display and so little care about anything else that's going on. It is literally like buying a car and never driving it. Just parking it in your garage. It's all about
the looks, and they were told, we can absolutely overcome any aesthetic concerns that you might have. We have these in-ceiling speakers with angles built in. It'll be perfect.
Yeah. They worked with the designer. The designer designed the room and did not give one iota of thought to where the speakers might be, because they watch HGTV and there's never.
In fact, if they were like, if we see a speaker, that's the end of that. So, yeah,
right, right.
But they got that big old TV. That's what they got.
And I understand. You don't have, not everybody has the time in their lives to care about everything. They pay other people to care about it. But I wish they would pay other people to care about it who actually cared about it, not just cared about making all the money. I mean, it's a 5-minute conversation with I just want to hear the owner say, yeah, we talked about having, full, speakers all the way around and the way you're supposed to, but it was really important, the aesthetic look at the place, so we decided to go with in-ceiling. That would be enough for me. That would be enough for me to say at least they considered it.
Maybe it was along those lines.
I don't believe that
it's more like this guy's friends, everybody they know, all their speakers are in the ceiling too, because that's what they always do. So,
well, I mean, I've been in houses like this where they have a big TV in this beautiful room that is absolutely acoustically awful, and all the speakers in the ceiling, and the owners can't operate the remote. Too. They just have no clue on how to turn the thing on. They're like, I press a button. If it doesn't work, I have to call somebody. So that's what I assume. I assume that because that has been my experience. So maybe I'm wrong, but whatever, dude. If that's your wall and you've got something to say to me, bring it. Come at me. All right. Comments. Cody. When we were recommending Wi-Fi speakers that can also do Bluetooth for $200 for Sean last week, Cody thought of his own setup and wanted to share, because we mentioned how the desire to have Wi-Fi limited the options, especially if running it all on battery power was the goal. In his case, he's using a Chromecast audio connected to a small power bank battery. He can plug that into any Bluetooth speaker to add Wi-Fi and streaming source. He knows the Chromecast audio is discontinued now, but you can still find them for sale, or the same concept could be used with a different streaming device. So yeah, if you have a USB outlet on your Because that's what Chromecast goes.
No,
Chromecast is HDMI.
No, Chromecast audio was just a regular 3.5
Oh,
millimeter
right.
audio jack, or you could also use optical coming out of there with the mini optical plug would work on the Chromecast audio. So that's why it was a nice device, because that made it very easy to plug into pretty much anything.
It was only around for like a year, though, right? It feels like it was only about a year before they.
I'm not sure, 1 or 2 years, but it's discontinued now. But no, I mean the general idea of just having some outboard streaming device. The idea being that now you can pick any Bluetooth speaker that you like, many of which have batteries built in, so that's not difficult to find.
And not only that, but many of them have USB ports that are for charging your phone or whatever. They come with that in mind, which means that if a lot of these Chromecast and streaming devices, they plug into your TV's USB port to charge while they're going. So, yeah, that's actually a really good suggestion. Sure. I like that. I don't know what exact streaming service you could use these days other than the Chromecast audio, but I'm sure we'll look for something. Joseph continues to find ridiculous audiophile cables to laugh about. We have actually the bottom of our topic list has had for
5-6 years at this point.
A list of audiophile products that if we ever get to the bottom of the list and run out of things to talk about, we want to continue going, we can go through them. We just never get to it because you guys have too many questions, which is great. I'm just saying, but it's been down there for a really long time. At this point,
it is way out of date.
One of them, somebody complained about the Xbox 360 or something. I think so. It's set up. Yeah, that one. That's how old it is. It was
7 years ago.
Xbox One. All right. And after we offhandedly joked about the $1,000 power cables, he knew we lowballed that price point. That is true. That $1,000 is actually, there's audiophile power cables that are a meter long and way more expensive than that. $1,000 is cheap in that world. Behold, he says, the Bella Sound Kahlua 1. Anyways, it's a 2-meter power cable for $2,700. They claim it's power conditioning right at your equipment, combing.
Yes.
I guess it's combining.
It's supposed to be combining, but
But in the copy on the website, it says
that's
combing
right.
Because
and I am copying that verbatim because they deserve it.
The elements of quantum level noise. What? The elements of what? Let me try again.
Believe me, this is verbatim. Believe me, because I could not come up with this. So.
Combing the elements of quantum level noise absorption with ambient temperature near superconductivity techniques.
Yep.
Those
are some words. ...
Those are words that all are big. And
ambient temperature near superconductivity. Okay, so they've literally done something that nobody can do.
Well, the whole idea of quantum computing is superconductivity, but isn't that right? But they have to have it at near absolute zero to make it work.
To make superconductors, they need to be very low temperatures. Quantum computing doesn't necessarily require superconductivity, but in any case, they threw all the words in.
They got all the words in one sentence, so they didn't have to write too much. 2-meter AC cable, $2,700. It comes with 200 hours of break-in, which clearly will make a big difference in the sound in your system when you
gotta line up those quantums.
For those of you, so for a long time, just for those of you that are kind of new to this world, you would read in reviews people taking speakers that they had gotten for review and putting them in a room and throwing a heavy blanket over them and playing a lot of times just music, but sometimes pink noise, sometimes
there's a specialized disc or track that is specifically for the purposes of break-in. Yes.
And the idea was that it would loosen up the woofers and make the speaker sound better or whatever, and it would play for like a month. They put it in there for like a month, which is ridiculous. It's not going to... There's actually a driver break-in test that they did on Audioholics to see, you can measure something that has more ability to hear things in your ears. They measure the differences between a driver, at when they first take it out of the box versus whatever, and all small drivers had 0 change pretty much, and I think the bigger woofers, like for subwoofers, within, was it like 5 seconds?
I thought it was half
Whatever
a second.
changed.
I'm pretty sure it was half a second.
Whatever.
Because it did take some time for the voice coil to warm up to full heat and for the suspension to move once. So yeah, half a second. It's legit.
Well, so basically what he surmised is any braking that needed to happen was happening when each driver was being tested to see whether or not it worked at all as it left the factory. And just that little blah, blah, blah that they did to make sure that it works was enough to get it. But anyways, so breaking in a power cable is running electricity through it for 200 hours. Because
I'd like to see how much. I'd like to see their power bill. Maybe that's why it costs $2,700.
Yeah, literally nothing. They never plugged that thing in. Why would they? Why would they?
All the rest of it is
risk scratching the copper finish off the ends or whatever.
All the rest of it is clear BS. I'm pretty sure that's not copper either. I'm pretty sure it's rhodium.
I didn't look at it.
It's got to be rhodium, right? Has to be at this level.
I don't know.
In any case, they claim that you will hear the incredible difference from the first note. Yeah. It's a steal, Tom.
Yeah. And if you don't, it's not. It's your speakers, or your preamp, or your DAC.
Not your room, though. It's got to be something in your gear, something you can buy.
They will never say anything bad about your room. Your room is immaterial to this entire thing. Yeah, don't get us started on this type of product, because this is stuff that, we've talked about it before. We're going to create a store called Best Sound Audio.
Oh, we shouldn't give that away. We can't let people in on the secret. We might still do it one day.
Yeah, we are. Do Best Sound Audio. Yep. We'll break in all of your power cables. All right, let's answer some questions here. Carl, Audiophile Review posted an editorial on the topic, which are more accurate, headphones or loudspeakers? I did not read this, but it's called Audiophile Review, which I think I either blocked them or they blocked me. I'm not sure which one happened
Could
first.
Be.
So,
yep. Anyways. No, yeah, that's the article as posted.
It immediately goes off the rails talking about amplifiers and reference tracks because audiophiles, but ultimately they conclude that no transducer is perfect. Okay. Processing and tuning are used to try to compensate for some set of assumptions about the listening environment or human hearing, and the final answer is neither, because even the very definition of accurate is too hard to pin down. So what's our take? If someone were to ask which are more accurate, headphones or loudspeakers, how would we respond? Accurate.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't like that word so much. I mean,
well, I would say this: if I were to define the term accurate as it is reproducing as closely as possible the original waveform. So, I mean, of course, the waveform has been translated in all kinds of ways, right? It's from the original sound wave in the air that then goes into a microphone, so that's a translation right there. And then that is converted into an electrical signal. Of course, that is a translation, most likely an analog signal at that point, but most likely translated into a digital waveform at some point, and then back into analog, and so on and so forth. All of these translations happening. But if we make the overall idea that waveform was maintained, or at least whatever the end result of the recording was, we want the transducer that now takes that recorded signal that was translated into an electrical signal, which is now translated into physical movement, and we want that movement to be as close to the waveform that's in the recording, then speakers will attempt to do that more so than headphones, because
if simply because of the subwoofer.
Well, and it's not just that. It's that headphones always have some kind of curve applied to them, because if you inserted a truly linear representation of the waveform directly into your ears, it wouldn't sound right. Because that linear representation was an external microphone. Well, there's a whole caveat to this, which is a binaural recording. In a binaural recording, The microphones are embedded in a dummy head or sometimes in a real live person's head, and now we want the headphone to reproduce that exactly as it was. And if you played that sound, a binaural recording made inside of a dummy head out of loudspeakers, it'd sound real weird. So, so I mean, I agree neither, because it depends on the recording. For one, a binaural recording needs to be played through headphones and won't sound correct coming out of loudspeakers. But a recording that was intended to be played out of loudspeakers, if headphones reproduce that truly linearly, accurate to the signal, it'd sound really weird to our ears. So headphones pretty much always have a curve to that. So, yeah, there you go. That's my take, Carl.
This is an argument that does. Honestly, my take is that this is an argument that doesn't need to be had.
It really doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, this is it's the sort of thing that people who just who love their gear want to prove that their gear is the best gear. And when you've been doing this as long as I've been doing this, and Rob as well, but when you've seen as much gear go in and out of your room, you very quickly stop having that emotional response to it. That sort of, I paid this much money for it, therefore it must be good, because if it's not good, then I wasted my money and therefore I'm a bad person.
I mean, to me, it's a fairly simple thing, which is that if I play a sweep where it's all of the frequencies that my human ears can detect, and that sweep said, play all of these sounds in one continuous sweep, all at the exact same volume level, if I perceive that sweep to play any particular sounds along that frequency sweep at levels higher or lower than the rest, then I will say, well, the loudspeakers are not alone. They're in a room. They're connected to other equipment. I'm whatever listening distance away. The headphones are not all by themselves. There's still all the interaction that's going on. But if I end up perceiving that frequency sweep as something other than all of these sounds came out at the same volume level, then something is distorted in terms of how accurately it's being reproduced. Simple as that.
But that distortion, like in the case of headphones, like we take a speaker and we put it in a room, and that speaker, tries to reproduce those sounds, those waveforms exactly as they were. Well, they're not alone. There's the room and everything else. So what you hear is being attuned and changed by the room. So you have to now either take the room out of the equation and say, okay, loudspeakers can be more accurate
anechoic chamber.
In the anechoic chamber, whereas headphones, they are always having this, in order to make sure it sounds normal to your ears, they have a curve applied to them. Well, you're also taking the room out of the equation a lot of times with that, and therefore people who have really expensive headphones are like, well, headphones sound more accurate than my speakers. Well, neither one of them sounds exactly the same. Then you take that same musical experience that was recorded and you put it in a different musical venue and it sounds different. So, there's a lot going on here. So whatever, just don't worry about it. Let's get to the next question here. Derek, this is the long one. Derek has got a very long question. Apparently we missed him, so we apologize, Derek. We don't often do that we are aware of.
It's certainly not intentional. No, I just somehow this was in my inbox. I mistakenly overlooked it. I apologize, Derek, and we're getting to it now.
All right. So Derek wrote us previously saying he had added rear speakers, but no sound was coming out of them if he used Xbox One for any streaming video apps. We remember this question. We speculated that maybe he had actually added side surround speakers, since the term rear speaker isn't entirely clear, but now he's written back with more details. His receiver is an Onkyo TXNR636, which can use a maximum of 7 speakers, and it can decode Dolby Atmos at 5.1.2, but not DTS:X. Derek was previously using a 5.1 setup, and he had his Xbox One to output 5.1 uncompressed PCM, and everything was working fine. He added the 6th and 7th surround back speakers. He can play the trim level test tones in his Onkyo, and the pink noise plays out of the correct speakers, so they're all wired correctly. He can use his Xbox One to play Blu-ray, and the 7.1 Dolby True HD or DTS HD Master Audio plays perfectly. He can also play a game that is clearly labeled as having 7.1 audio, and with the Xbox One set to output 7.1 uncompressed PCM, those play perfectly. Some 7.1 games offer a little audio test section, and the test tones play out of the correct speakers, so Blu-ray movies and 7.1 games, those are fine, which historically has been the case with the Xbox One. It's when you get to streaming services and other things that you have problems. Oh, and here we go. And the only problem arises when he goes to use a streaming video app. He specifically went looking for 5.1 content and found some on Vudu. I'm sorry, 7.1 content and found some on Vudu. Some of the movies are clearly labeled as being 7.1 audio, but if he leaves the Xbox One set to output 7.1 uncompressed PCM, which again works perfectly for the games, no sound ever comes out of his surround back speakers. These 7.1 movies on Vudu seem to only play in 5.1, and since the Xbox One is set to output 7.1 uncompressed PCM, he can't even use an up mixer, which has always been the case with the stupid Xbox One. His surround backs just sit there doing nothing. Then, just in case it's all Vudu's fault, they just mislabeled the audio track on some of their movies. He tried playing some NKV files in Plex, which he knows for certain are in 7.1. Once again, his Xbox One set to output 7.1 uncompressed PCM, his surround back speakers are completely silent. So he tried other available audio output settings from the Xbox One. If he sets it to 5.1 uncompressed PCM, the Vudu movies, and the 7.1 Plex Plex MKV files play fine in 5.1, of course, and he can upmix so that sound comes out of the surround back speakers, but then he feels like he's missing on some discrete 7.1 audio, particularly from the games, and manually changing the audio output in Xbox One back and forth is a pain. Welcome to my world, sir. So he tried bitstream output, both Dolby Digital and DTS. Both of these are in 5.1. Again, it's okay. He can play an upmixer, but he wants discrete 7.1 audio when the source has it. Then he tried setting the Xbox One to output bitstream Atmos. His receiver kicked into Atmos mode, but the end result was the same as setting the Xbox One to output 7.1 uncompressed PCM, which we know is the case. His surround backs are silent, and he can't apply an upmixer. What's even weirder is that he heard us talk about the problems playing 5.1 content on the Xbox One to output 7.1 or bitstream, and how it plays the side surround channels out of the surround back speakers and leaves the side surrounds completely silent. He's seen lots of other people complaining about the exact same thing online too, but he hasn't had that particular problem with his Onkyo. The side surround speakers play just fine for him, but he can't get anything to come out of his surround back speakers unless it's a Blu-ray movie or a 7.1 game. So what's the best thing to do? My take on this is probably wrong, but I hope it's wrong. I hope Rob has a suggestion that's better than mine.
I don't know. I think I gave you the suggestion you might be about to say at one point.
Okay. So what's the best thing he could do? He's leaning towards just leaving the Xbox One sent to output 5.1 uncompressed PCM. Blu-ray movies still play in 7.1 just fine because there's a second audio option for those discs that says let my receiver decode audio, and everything else, games and streaming content, comes out as 5.1, which you get an upmix with his receiver. It's not perfect discrete audio like he'd ideally like to have, but at least all 7 of his speakers make sounds this way, and it's a lot less of a pain not having to manually switch audio modes all the time. Do we agree with doing things this way? Why do you think this is happening?
Why do you think no sound is coming out of the surround backs?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, with the streaming audio services, I don't know how many are actually delivering true 7.1. Although, I mean, if they labeled it as such, you would hope that, yes, it's actually there.
Hope, yeah.
I wonder if the Xbox One maybe doesn't actually have a Dolby Digital Plus decoder or something. I'm like, it's treating it like it's a 5.1 signal. I mean, because if it's Dolby Digital, regular Dolby Digital, that can't carry 7.1 channels of audio. Can't do it. It's limited to 5.1. Dolby Digital Plus can carry actual discrete 7.1 audio. So I'm like, is this somehow taking the 7.1 Dolby Digital Plus audio stream from whatever service it is, like Vudu? Vudu would send out its 7.1 audio in Dolby Digital Plus. When they do so, there is like a traditional Dolby Digital 5.1 core. It's not really the way Dolby encodes things, but if you sort of think of it that way, it gives you the right idea so the idea is that it's always backwards compatible, right? If somebody only has a regular Dolby Digital decoder, they'll still get audio from that Dolby Digital Plus stream. It's designed that way. So I'm like, it's almost as though the Xbox One either doesn't truly have a Dolby Digital Plus decoder, or it's a bad implementation where it's only taking the 5.1 core and using that. I don't know for sure, but
Xbox One has a bad implementation of audio. I can't believe that would be the case. For Microsoft, they're such a huge company. Clearly, they should be able to get audio, right? That's like the simplest thing.
But I mean, he's absolutely right that if you leave the Xbox One set to output 7.1 uncompressed PCM. Well, you can never use an up mixer because the receiver is saying, I'm already getting 7.1 channels. 2 of them happen to be silent, but you're sending me the channels, so I can't, there's nothing for me.
And Atmos is going to do the same thing.
The Atmos implementation works the same way because it's actually decoding the audio first and then just putting it into an Atmos container and sending that out. So
I'm actually confused why it's not coming out of the surround back since it's coming around.
And you know what? I've seen people say it both ways. I've seen people say whenever I play something in 5.1, but I've set my Xbox to output 7.1, the surround channels that should be coming out of the sides come out of the back. That's what happens to you. But then I've heard other people say, no, for me it works. The sides come out of the sides, but my backs are silent, which is exactly the case
I need to check it because I don't even know what mine is
doing
set
anymore
because I've given up on the Xbox. Yeah, I've kind of given up on it. Just enjoyed my 2.0
This is why
sound.
that's exactly it. My suggestion, I mean, this is even crazier than setting it to 5.1 uncompressed PCM and using your up mixer. There are some streaming services that are still only sending their audio in stereo. They're only in 2.0 stereo.
Or even within Netflix, there are shows that will be in 2.0.
That's right. And
or mono.
Similarly, if you have set your Xbox to output 5.1 uncompressed, you can apply an up mixer, but what it's done is sent out those 5.1 discrete channels, but only 2 of them contain any audio information. So when you apply your up mixer to the 5.1, it still doesn't put any sound into your side surrounds from a stereo source because it's like, I already got a signal for what the side surround should be doing. It's silence. So the only sound is coming out of the front left, right? So
let me spread that silence to the back
to the back speakers. So the crazy way that, I mean, this is the way I continue to use my Xbox One. So first of all, using it as a Blu-ray player for physical Blu-ray discs. Yep, it's got that separate setting that says let my receiver decode audio, and that works just fine. But for everything else, I leave it set to output 2.0 stereo. Because all the sound is there, right? Even if it's a discrete 7.1 game, all of the sound is down mixed and put into 2 channels. Those 2 channels are now sent out to my AV receiver, and I let my receiver use its up mixer to put that sound, that stereo sound, into all of my speakers, and it never fails. I mean, is it truly discrete audio? Obviously not anymore, but it never fails to give me all the sound, and my up mixer makes all of my speakers actually make noises.
I think that you shouldn't do that.
Okay. I mean, fair enough.
And the reason being is that I think what he cares about more is games and 5.1 movies and stuff.
Possibly, yeah.
So stereo. So if he's watching a stereo source and it just comes out stereo. I think he's
probably
not
okay with that.
That's not going to be. I think he.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
But what Rob's saying. Okay, so think of it this way: the receiver or the initial signal is got this discrete sound, and it down mixes it to 2.0. It doesn't just collapse it; it down mixes it, which means that there's some phase things going on here, which are indicators to you as the listener where the sound's supposed to be coming from. Well, that's also an indicator to the receiver what speaker it could be coming out of. So that spreading around is not happenstance and not random. It is, here's some phase differences here. This probably means that this sound should be coming out of the surround or the surround back speaker. I'm going to spread this stuff around with my Dolby Surround up mixer. Therefore, I'll put that sound back there. So it's not like by down mixing it and getting stereo that it's just going to randomly put sounds in places. It's not. There's a thoughtful algorithm that looks at the sound and tries to place it where it's supposed to be. It does a pretty
good job too.
If you if you have that if you already have 5.1, well, all it's doing is looking at the surround speakers and saying what is this is actually supposed to be coming from behind, and is it supposed to be coming out from a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left, and then it uses those speakers, which is a lot quote unquote easier than doing that with a 2-channel source. But I think you would be okay either way. I think that you would feel better as a listener to do it in 5.1 and just not worry about old episodes of The Simpsons being in stereo.
Yeah, that's it's totally fair enough. I think if you stick with the plan that you've got right now of just leaving it in 5.1 uncompressed, so everything comes out as 5.1 uncompressed PCM. And yes, things that are discrete 7.1 are not being sent out as discrete 7.1. You're using an up mixer to actually make your surround backs come alive. But that information that would have been in the two surround back speakers is now only being down mixed into your side surround channels in that 5.1 uncompressed, and it's pretty easy to matrix that back out into your surround back speakers. So yep, I agree. Tom's reasoning is perfectly sound. For me, I care even less, and I want all my speakers to be making sound even when it's a stereo source.
Well, you have
and I have so many other ways of streaming.
You also have to consider.
Yeah.
I think I used to have, for a while I did 5.1 and then or 7.1, and I was only getting side surround information on my surround back speakers.
Right.
So I changed it to 5.1 for a while, and then I changed it to 2.0 or whatever.
Yeah, stereo.
But then I got the better version of Netflix, so I got Atmos.
Right.
So I think I then changed it to Atmos so that I would get actual Atmos when I'm watching Atmos, which means it screws up everything else. But I cared more about making sure I got discrete Atmos than I did about everything else.
Fair enough.
I think that's what I ended up doing. Ryan is back with more questions about his basement home theater build where he currently has the ceiling exposed. Okay. We said to put the Atmos speakers 5 feet in front and 5 feet behind, but in front of his seats, he has an HVAC duct right at that distance, so he could either put the top front speakers 3 feet in front of his seats or 6 foot 8 inches. Then for his top rear speakers, in order to keep the right top rear speaker 2 feet away from the door on the partial back wall, he had a rough-in plan for it to only be 2.5 feet behind the seats, but he could move it back another 16 inches. What would we recommend? Bug.
So I mean, I think maybe where I'll start speaking about this is just to note for you that so it's all back to angles, right? When it comes to the recommended locations, it's all about elevation angles. And I mean, it looks like I don't know if this is a full 8-foot ceiling. You know,
doesn't
if you're
look like it.
Judging by how
look
much,
at the door.
Yeah,
that door,
I mean, that's 6 feet 8, right? That door. It's a standard doorway, so that's 6 feet 8. It doesn't look like this is a full 8 feet to that door, so I'm gonna estimate maybe this is a 7.5 foot tall ceiling. It might even be lower than that, but I'm just gonna estimate this is a 7.5 foot tall ceiling. So normally we say you've probably got, when you're sitting down in a standard 8-foot ceiling, about 5 feet from your ears to the ceiling. And since the recommended elevation angle for top front and top rear speakers is 45 degrees, well, that's really simple math, because if you've got 5 feet from your ears to the ceiling, then a 45-degree elevation angle would be 5 feet in front of you and 5 feet behind you. Now, if your ceiling is more like 7.5 feet, well, now you're 4.5 feet from your ears to the ceiling, so 45-degree elevation angle would be 4.5 feet in front of you and 4.5 feet behind you. But those are not the only acceptable angles for top front and top rear speakers.
That's just smack dab in the middle of the range.
That's just the number one ideal location if you can, but it's anywhere from a 30-degree elevation angle in front of you to a 55-degree elevation angle. So if we're talking about this, certainly looks like it's not an 8-foot ceiling. I'm going to estimate that it's 4.5 feet from your ears to your ceiling. Then within the recommended angles, they could be anywhere from 3.15 feet, basically 3 feet in front of you, to 7.8 feet behind you. Those would be the recommended distances based on the angles and based on what looks to be a little bit lowered ceiling height. So the 3 feet in front of you for your top fronts would be totally acceptable, but the 6 feet 8 inches would also be totally acceptable. That's less than 7.8 feet, which is within the recommended range.
Right.
To me, you'll probably, I would guess, most people who are starting with Atmos would probably prefer to go with the 3 feet in front of you because it's a little bit easier to notice, right? It's closer to being directly overhead. When they're quite far in front of you and overhead, it's much more diffuse and you don't notice it nearly as much. So I'm guessing you'll prefer the 3 feet. But for the top rears, I would probably recommend moving it back a bit because only 2.5 feet behind you, is kind of a no man's land. It's like not really where top rears should be. It's too close. And it's not really where top middles should be. It's a little bit too far back for top middles. So if you can move your top rear speakers back, now you're within that, slightly more than 3 feet range, exactly where it'd be recommended. So we're basically saying 3 feet in front of you, 3 feet behind you, more or less, I think would work quite nicely.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it, like you said, it's anywhere in this range. So
that's right.
You just want both the front speakers to be in line with each other, both the back speakers to be in line with each other. The front ones are a little bit further forward than the 4 feet or the 5 feet or whatever. That's fine. If the back speakers are also further behind, that's also fine. But having them close makes a little bit more sense to me as well. Am I breaking up for you? Because you are breaking up like crazy.
Oh, yeah, you've been your video has been pausing many times. So our Skype connection is not stellar.
I'm hardwired in. I don't know what the deal is.
I don't know.
No, it is not. Those of you watching this on YouTube, feel free to check us out on the whatever video. I guess our other video is going to look the same.
Well, the video is going to look the same, but the audio will be cleaned up. Yes. Yeah.
There you go. All right. For his 4 in-ceiling Atmos speakers, he's planning on the go with Mica M8Cs.
We missed a question there. Sorry. We didn't talk about his clip speakers.
Okay. Here we go.
Yeah.
I just was scrolling through pictures.
Yeah.
He already owns Klipsch Reference 2 series towers and center for his front 3 speakers. He has pretty firm plans to use in-wall Klipsch speakers for his side surrounds, which he had rough and planned to go directly to each side. But since he only has a partial back wall, and the room extends way back on the left-hand side, he was planning to use wall mounts for a pair of surround back speakers, which would be 4 feet away from his side surrounds. Anything we would change about that? I don't love using surround back speakers in here at all. Is there a door right behind him?
I knew you would say that there is a door right behind him to over to his right hand side. So he's basically putting one surround back speaker in his rear right corner, which does exist, and then equaling that on the left hand side. But he basically doesn't have there is a back wall on his left-hand side, but it's way back there. So he's more or less mounting these surround back speakers on his side.
He's only got one row of seats, though, right?
He's only got one row of seats. Yeah. And furthermore, coming up later, not to spoil it ahead of time, but I'm going to be suggesting he actually move his seat forward without necessarily moving where his surround speakers are planned to be installed. So I might be in favor with this. I'm a bigger fan of surround back speakers than Tom is, but in this instance, those are not ideally positioned surround back speakers, not at all. They are too far apart. They aren't truly giving you that I'm right behind you effect. You're gonna have top rear speakers. So there's no way that I'd be putting your surround backs in the ceiling or something like that. That would make no sense. And I'm going to actually recommend you end up with your side surround speakers in a position that is a bit behind your seat as opposed to directly to the sides. And I think that'll give you a pretty darn good effect.
Yeah, I don't really see any reason to try to put surround backs in this.
Yeah, because there's nowhere else
there's just too many. There's nowhere else to put them, and they're way too far apart. They're like basically on the wall 3 or 4 feet behind where he's planning on putting his surround speakers, which angle wise to your ear, to the back of your head, is not that many degrees difference. It's
they're
really
a second
close.
Set of side surrounds is what they are. They aren't really surround backs in this orientation.
That's what they are.
Yeah.
So again, we'll try this again. For his 4 in-ceiling Atmos speakers, he's planning to go with the Mica M8Cs because they're only $40 as opposed to the much more expensive Klipsch in-ceiling models. He figures if he really wants to, he could upgrade them in the future. At some point, you won't. You won't do that. No one ever opens their ceiling up twice. So we think that they'll be okay for the time being to get him started. I don't think that you'll ever upgrade them. So you buy what you want now, or you don't.
In ceilings that are of the same diameter, it's not too hard to replace if you were to try these and be like, these just totally don't cut it. But I think they'll be fine.
Well, okay. So one of the things I worry about with matching Klipsch with non-Klipsch speakers or non-horn-loaded speakers are level matching issues.
Sure.
Where your Klipsch speakers, they take very little power to get very, very loud, and then the other speakers might take a lot of power to get very, very loud. Well, if you're really only going to be sitting about 4 feet away from these things, then they'll get plenty loud without an issue. So if you really think that you'll upgrade someday, you buy the speakers knowing that what would be the Klipsch speaker that you would put there in instead, and make sure it's the same. It's either the same size hole or
the Klipsches are bigger. Yeah.
Well, even if they're bigger, I mean, it depends on how he mounts them. If he mounts them right up against a
stud or something. Yeah, true enough.
A stud or something, you won't be able to just expand the hole. You'll have to like offset the hole, and then what I mean. It ends up being much more of a deal. So, be careful about that. Make sure that if you're really going to, you have a very clear, very delineated, very well thought out plan for how you're going to switch these speakers out.
But honestly, so I think you are okay. I think you're okay going with that plan. We've said over and over again how your Atmos speakers, as long as they aren't utter garbage, are probably absolutely fine for the duties of playing the Atmos sounds, and the mic is good enough, certainly for a start. Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah, these are not utter garbage, so they'd be fine. Right. So he's planning on having his seat inside surround speakers 13 feet from the front wall. He likes the low price point of a fixed frame silver screen, and as we pointed out last time, going with the slightly smaller 120 versus the 130 will give him enough space on either side and below the screen to position his front 3 Klipsch speakers quite nicely. So that's what he has in mind for a screen in the seating distance. He looked at the 2 projectors we recommended most highly. The Epson Home Cinema 4010 and the BenQ 50. He's not a gamer, so the longer input latency of the BenQ doesn't matter to him. The BenQ is cheaper and has full 18 gigabits per second HDMI inputs. So is there really any reason to pay more for the Epson 4010? I don't know.
I mean, there do exist reasons. I can give justification if you're the type of person who is like, I kind of want to get the 4010. Is there any way I can justify it? It's like, yeah, it is incrementally better in a number of ways. But that doesn't mean that the starting, if you consider the BenQ HD3550 as the starting point, that's somehow bad. It's like, no, it's a really nice, solid, good-looking projector. If you haven't been watching a projector this whole time, you're going to be blown away by the image quality for $1,500 that the HD3550 gives you. It's if you put it side by side and critically analyze it next to the 4010 is incrementally better in some ways. That's really all it is. So honestly, if it's the money matters more at this point, I have no problem recommending the 3550 to you because it's a really good looking projector. So go for it. This is the point where I'll mention that you're talking about a 120-inch screen. I think that's the right choice, for all those reasons that you listed. If you sit 13 feet away from that, as you have, roughed it in planned, that's going to put you at 37 degrees as your field of view, which for me is a little bit smaller than I would love to have for a projection setup. Like, going projector, I want that cinematic experience, which for me, I'd be sitting about 11 feet away from a 120-inch screen. Which I think you can entirely do. I don't think you need to move your side surround speakers, but this might impact where you end up putting your top fronts and top rears. And the nice thing here is, if you end up moving your seat 2 feet forward from where you've got the seat planned right now, well, now you don't need to move your top rear speakers back, because they were going to be 2.5 feet behind you. Now they're going to be 4.5 feet behind you. That sounds really good. And you were saying that the top front speakers either need to be 3 feet in front of you or 6.5 feet in front of you. Well, now they'd only be 1 foot in front of you if you've moved your seat 2 feet forward, or 4.5 feet in front of you. So all of a sudden, your top front and top rear speakers are exactly where you would want them to be. Your ceiling is about 4.5 feet above you, and now your top front is 4.5 feet in front of you, and your top rear is 4.5 feet behind you. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be pretty close. Yeah, we are estimating, but it's going to be something pretty close to that. This solves so many possible little issues without changing your plans to something that doesn't work for you. We're now saying, okay, the top fronts are going to go in front of that heating duct. The top rears are going to go exactly where you had planned. Your side surrounds are going to go exactly where you had planned, but you're just going to move your seat 2 feet forward, going to give you the nicer, bigger field of view with the 120-inch screen, and everything else falls into place, and you don't need surround back speakers anymore. It's all solved.
Yeah, I mean, unless you absolutely positively know that you want a 37-degree field of view,
Right.
unless you've measured it out at a at a cinema, you know exactly what you're looking for as far as, and you don't want to be any closer to that, then Rob's 37 is fine, but it's
It's fine.
not quite big enough. You want
Right.
to be a little bit closer than that. So it's a
Like
guy who's just like
37
6
I
feet
would
from a
accept if it's like, well,
92-inch screen.
yeah, 37 is the type of thing I would accept if like I can afford a 75-inch flat panel and I have to sit, the distance away that equals a 37-degree. I'm like, yeah, I can live with that. But if I'm going projector,
Right.
I'd want bigger.
Yeah. So given where he wants to position his equipment at the very back of that extended section of the rear wall, he's going to need a very long HDMI cable upwards of 50 feet. I'm not sure why he would need something that long. This room, there's no way this room is that long.
I don't know. It must be something to do with the way he's routing it. Yeah.
I don't know
why.
Is there any passive HDMI cable that will do at that length? Does he need an active HDMI cable, fiber optic? Well, is it a 50-foot long room? Is that what you're thinking, or is it going to have to be routed around a bunch of stuff? Because your projector is not going to be all the way at the front of your room.
Maybe
it's
it's actually in another
behind your seats.
Maybe it's actually in another room in this basement. I'm not really sure. I'm going to take it as wrote that it's going to be 50 feet long. I'm not entirely sure why, but let's just say that it is. You definitely don't want to use a passive HDMI cable. It's not going to do it.
50 foot passive can work for 1080p and other things,
right?
But if you're going to get this BenQ with the full 18 gigabits and everything like that, you're going to need active. It's just not. It's going to fail. I mean, it's just not going to pass through the full bandwidth that you're looking for.
50 feet is basically the upper limit of active. Beyond 50 feet, I probably would recommend going fiber optic, but 50 feet active will be fine. Spend the little bit extra money. We just gave you reason that you don't have to spend any money on surround back speakers. Put that towards a really good active HDMI cable. Get the one from Blue Jeans. I'm kind of begging you to do that. Get Blue Jeans active HDMI cable, the 50-foot length, and that'll serve you well. And put it in a conduit like we said last time.
The BenQ has a 1.3 times zoom lens range. Does that affect the image quality at all? Would having the projector closer to the screen improve the image in any way versus the longest possible distance? Well, you can run into problems with or at the longest possible distance, but if
this
you're
is only
within
a
the usable range that tells you, if you're, I mean, first of all, an optical zoom is. I don't see any issues with this. Really, I'm more worried about how bright it's going to be, how much light output is going to actually reach the screen. That having a little bit of zoom shouldn't make that much of a difference. But the only thing you could really run into is just a brightness issue. But I would, as long as you're within the recommended, hey, if you want a 120-inch screen, go between this and this, you'll be fine.
Yeah, with projectors that have really long zoom ranges, it does tend to be the case that if you have the projector as close as it can possibly be versus as far away as it can possibly be, that when it's farther away, it is dimmer. I mean, that's just a normal thing that we would expect to happen. But when it's only a 1.3 times zoom, that's not enough zoom to make a really noticeable difference. The other thing is the closer you put the projector, the steeper the angle the light is hitting the sides of the screen, right? You've moved the projector closer, so that's a wider angle and a steeper angle up and down that the light is hitting the screen, which means more of the light is reflecting off to the sides and up and down. So generally, things look more uniform on the screen if you have the projector as far back as you can put it. That's a narrower cone of light, less steep angles hitting the screen, more of that light coming back towards your eyes as opposed to reflecting off at an angle. But again, with 1.3 times, not really going to make a huge difference either way.
Right. Mike, we recommended Yamaha's MusicCast system as a whole house audio solution to Mike a little while ago. He went with the Avantage RX A3080 flagship for his theater. He also went with our suggestion for the Yamaha Bar 400 soundbar for his master bedroom. It works very nicely, but it turns out the room is quite large. Which one? His bedroom?
Yes.
About 24 by 24, and his TV and the soundbar are about 17 feet away when he's watching from his bed.
Yep.
So the bar 400 isn't quite up to the task. I wouldn't have thought so. 17 feet away. Holy moly.
Yes.
He's going to use it in a different, smaller bedroom, but for the master bedroom, he needs more output. Holy moly.
Fair enough.
Are way far away from this thing.
That's a big old master bedroom.
So I know it sounds yeah, he's got a big master bedroom for sure, but on top of that, it looks like he's like in the back left, and then the TV's in the he's in the back right, and the TV's in the front left corner almost. So he's going diagonal across this room. So yeah, I can imagine hearing things would be an issue. His 85-inch TV is mounted on a side wall using an articulated mount so they can face the bed. He still wants a sound bar or speakers that can hang below the TV and move along with it. He's thinking there probably isn't an actual sound bar that will get the job done, so perhaps one of those passive speaker bars where it's 3 speakers that just happen to share one long cabinet. He isn't worried about having 5.1 surround sound, I hope not, yeah. Just having the front 3 channels would be fine, and he wants a subwoofer, but he isn't looking to pressurize his master bedroom, just something to nicely blend with the speakers and fill in the low notes. He's thinking it's 24 by 24 by 8. Yeah. Oh, can you put it right next to your bed? Because that's what you're going to have to do, unless you don't want to pressurize this room. Yeah. He has a fairly basic Yamaha receiver so that he can still connect to MusicCast, and then a passive speaker bar with sufficient output capabilities, and a sub that will just blend nicely. He can spend as much as $3,500. What do we recommend? Well, yeah, you could do that.
Yep.
You could definitely do a small, like an entry level ish, whatever the entry level is that still accepts MusicCast and all that stuff. Yamaha receiver, if you don't care about how they look, you could get the HSU, the Shure little bookshelf horn load speakers.
I guess
you could do those. Those would be loud.
They would.
Or something like
How
that.
easy they would be to mount, like hanging below an articulated mounted TV, though. I'm not super into that.
No.
But I'm
just thinking, yeah.
Yeah, along these same lines, I am thinking horn loaded, I am thinking efficient, and I'm thinking Klipsch, not surprisingly, who last week I mentioned how they have their Reference Premier on-wall speakers. Well, one of the models they offer is one of these speaker bars, where it's 3 of those Reference Premier on-wall speakers that happen to share one long cabinet, which would be pretty slick looking for one, and then also nice and easy to mount on what you get, those L brackets that just hang down from the actual Visa TV mount. Yeah, those L brackets that hang down comes with a bracket that you would attach right onto that, and it would all secure quite easily and nicely to your existing TV mount. So in all of those ways, Klipsch's, what is the model number here? It's the RP440D. And it goes for $800, so certainly not breaking the bank. It's 92 dB efficient and can take 400 watts if you really, really want it to. It can play loud. Louder than just about any sound. I suppose I could mention that insane Sennheiser soundbar, which I think is about $3,500. It's also so enormous, I wouldn't trust it hanging below a TV mount. They call it a soundbar, but it's absolute insanity. Well, so I would rather go with this Klipsch.
Yeah, I get that, and this makes a lot of sense. But there's also like the Yamaha digital projectors, the sound projectors.
But is loud really their forte?
They just have so many drivers in them.
They can do the beam forming
so many little tweeters that go.
The beam forming thing where it aims it right at you. That's true.
You can set those things so that they're either, trying to do, bounce around your room surround sound, phase surround sound, or no surround sound.
Yeah, well, they do have the thing where they use all those drivers to direct the sound right at you. That's true.
I don't know how those work with MusicCast because I've kind of not paid attention years, but those by themselves are basically a receiver and a sound bar all together. Yeah. They do all of their own processing. Yeah. So that would, and they usually end up costing a couple of grand anyway. So you would not need.
Yeah, because you definitely be going for the big one that has the 68 drivers or whatever it is that's all packed into there. You'd want to go for the big one. Yeah.
Again, I don't even know if you can hang that from the bottom of a TV.
That's the thing again. I mean, this klipsch is pretty lightweight. It's definitely meant to be wall mounted, no question, and will easily mount below the TV. I mean, it's very efficient and can accept tons of power if you wanted to. So the output, I'm not concerned about the klipsch. That's why I'm pretty okay with that. Now, pairing it up with a Yamaha receiver, absolutely. I would suggest to you, on the outside chance that you ever decide, maybe I will add, surround speakers, going with one of the current model year models. If you're in the RX-V series, it'll end in a 5. If you're in the RX-A series, it'll end with an 80. An 8.0. Going with the current model year lets you do that thing where you could use a pair of MusicCast 20 speakers as wireless surrounds if you ever wanted to. So it's kind of like, why not? They're available at Accessories for Less now at lovely discounted prices. I'd probably go for the top of the line RX-V, which is the 685. That gives you a nice 90 watts per channel. It's only $400. In fact, I think it's $380 over at Accessories for Less. So certainly not breaking the bank. And it actually has front, left, right pre-outs. It doesn't have a pre-out for the center, but if the receiver is only powering the center channel and for some reason you need even more amplifier power, because like I say, that klipsch reference Premiere thing can take 400 watts if you really want it to, you have the option of adding external amps for the front, left, right channels. That 685 actually has like a sister model in the RX-A series, which is the 780. They're like identical feature-wise. So the only thing to maybe upgrade there would be to go up to the Avantage 880, which is $580 over Accessories for Less, because that gives you a full set of pre-outs. If you're like, I really don't trust that this receiver can power just the center speaker all by itself, full set of pre-outs comes with the 880. Subwoofer, though, what are we going to do there, Tom?
Well, if you're gonna put it close, if you are your bed, you're regardless of whether or not you want to pressurize your room, you're gonna have to pressurize your room to really have the experience that you're looking for. So, if you can put it close to your bed, then you can go with something smaller, like like one of the sealed boxes from SBS.
Yeah, I was thinking
unfortunately,
like a 2000. I mean, I wouldn't go 1000 series in here. I'd go like an SB 2000.
Yeah, but it still has to be close.
It still has to be close, but I'd be like okay with an SB 2000 here that's beside the bed. I think that could do the job. It's $700. So I mean, if you total up all the prices, $800 for the klipsch, $700 for the SB 2000, and then even let's go for the $600, basically the 880 or something like that. You're well under the $3,500 you were willing to spend. But I mean, if this sub is going to be somewhere across the room, maybe a cylinder. Maybe the PC 2000. I feel pretty comfortable with that.
If yes, that's what you'd have to go with a cylinder if you're gonna, if at least in my mind, if you're going to go across the room from yourself, because that gives you the output that you'd really be looking for,
and a form factor that doesn't have to look crazy inside of a bedroom. I like the cylinders. They're soft and round.
They are soft and round. Your wife can throw her laundry on top of it, or you can throw your laundry on top of it. Put the plant up there. Watch it vibrate off. Mike, last week we talked about Kevin A's situation where he was forced to replace his dead-end 4520 with the Pioneer Elite receiver, and Kevin was thinking the Pioneer was weak because it kept shutting down and going to protection mode. At the very end of the discussion, did Rob really say to run MCACC? Have we ever heard of the system post MCACC? Mike thinks anything that has had MCACC applied sounds awful. We talk about Odyssey all the time and sometimes Drac, but Mike says he sometimes gets us to recommend some sometimes. What? The MCACC, really? If we actually recommend that, it might make him have to carefully consider our taste when he's listening to our recommendations. So do you actually hear that, or do you just misunderstand? Like, dude, if you don't want to listen to us, nobody's making you do this. All right, let's just.
No, he's not taking it that way. Don't take super offense, Tom. He's ribbon.
I'm just saying. I mean, no one's forcing you to be here, dude. But, I don't remember us saying that. But the reality is any system, even the garbage one that was on Onkyo last year, I think they've improved this year, will set up your speakers just fine, and that's normally what we're going with.
I mean,
you can go ahead and run it, and it will send up the speakers.
Right. I mean, to be completely clear on what I was suggesting there, this was when he was talking about potentially using his Denon just as a dumb amplifier, which we ultimately said he shouldn't need to do. But if he goes ahead and does that anyway, we were talking about the setup process of making sure that the trim levels are set appropriately, because you're no longer using the built-in amps of the Pioneer. You've now connected to an external amplifier. So I was saying, you just run the MCACC because that allows it to set the trim levels for you, and it'll do a perfectly reasonable and fine job of that. So that's essentially what I was saying for. If you hate the results of the equalization that it applies, well, then you just turn off MCACC after having run it. But the running it is to set the distances and the trim levels. I didn't make that explicitly clear, but that's why I was saying to run the auto setup. Now, I have heard systems post MCACC, like every other auto EQ system, consider it just the potential cherry on top. It is not going to fix a bad room. It is not going to fix bad speakers. This is, if you've already set up everything really nicely and already addressed your room's acoustics, it might be able to give you slightly more linear response by applying some EQ. Would I use this in a bad room and expect its auto EQ to make a world of difference that improves the sound? Absolutely not. But I wouldn't expect that from any equalization system. That said, MCACC has certainly never been my favorite out of the auto EQ systems. I've never thought it does a fantastic job that I want everyone to rush out and buy. So there you go. That's more or less where I fall on that.
Yeah, I used MCACC before Odyssey was really a thing, and then I felt like it was either, and this was a long time ago, so you can't really hold me to this because it doesn't apply to today's stuff. But I felt like it either did very little or did, a negative thing. So I kind of stayed away from it. But I got no problems with people using it. Some people love it, and that's fine. All right. Let me get back to the questions because I was trying to find a sound bar for this dude in the Yamaha thing, and I'm not really seeing anything here. I clicked on the stuff that's supposed to be good, and it's all got four tweeters and two woofers.
Well, just so you know, your Skype video is essentially dead for me over here. I'm still hearing your audio, but you're...
Oh, I haven't been able to hear half of what you said.
Fantastic connection.
I've just nodded a lot, so it's been... Thank you, Skype. Microsoft killing it again. Microsoft PlayStation 5. 6. Microsoft PlayStation 6. Can't wait. Mike, last week we talked about
just
Kevin
did
A's
that
situation. Wait a second. I already did that one. Infinite Gary. Last week when we were talking about OLEDs and briefly mentioned micro LED modular displays, Tom said something about looking forward to projectors eventually being replaced, or that's where projectors will end up going, something along those lines. Do we think there will ever come a time we no longer use projectors throwing light onto a screen? Even today, aside from just sheer size, there's something different about the way a projected image looks versus an emissive display. So could projection survive not just because of size and price, but because of the unique way it looks? No. That is my wholehearted response to that. Emissive displays, in my opinion, look better than the same quality projection displays. Black levels can be better, just objectively true.
So like if big
you're less worried about ambient light in the room.
Right. If big wall-sized displays become affordable, I mean, that's a lot of ifs, right? We know the big wall-sized displays with these modular panels is going to be possible on a technical level, but as far as it becoming affordable, that's a big caveat. But if it does, then the notion that people will opt for a projection setup at that point, if the projection setup is not significantly cheaper, right? If we're saying that the price is comparable and it's just a matter of, are you going to opt for a projection or a modular display that can cover your whole wall? I mean, just look at commercial movie theaters, all right? Obviously, this whole time we've been using projection setups in commercial movie theaters because there was literally no alternative, right? That's the only way you can make an image that size of a commercial movie theater screen. But now that the commercial version of Samsung's The Wall and Sony's crystal LED display are becoming available, some theaters are choosing to install. They're way more expensive than their projection setup, but they're like, look what we can do. We can have a sized self-emissive display that is way brighter. The contrast is way higher. And this is something we can use to draw new audiences to our venue. It's even though it's way more expensive, we think it's worth it because people are like, whoa, look at that screen. I've never seen a commercial movie theater that looks like that. So if it can get down to the same price at some point, projection is dead.
Projection is such a pain to deal with. You have to have line of sight from the back of the room or something hanging down from your ceiling in the middle of your room to the screen. You got to deal with bulbs and everything else. No. I wish projection was dead right now. I like it because of the size, and I like it because of the cost.
Right.
But I want if I could replace the screen in here with a 92 or 90 inch or 100 inch emissive display, I'd do it right now. I'd do it. You'd find my projector on the freaking corner with a brand new bulb that I just bought.
There you go, Gary.
That's my balls. So we've been talking a bit about OLED and LCD factories lately, and we've mentioned mother glass and how more than one screen size might be cut from one sheet of mother glass. For example, LG Display has talked about how their new OLED factory in China lets them make sheets of mother glass that allow them to cut a couple of 77-inch panels and a few 48-inch panels from one sheet. But both of those screen sizes are still 4K resolution, so the pixels in the 48-inch panels must be smaller and closer together, right? Or in the case of making 8K TVs, Gary assumes manufacturers like Samsung and LG are still using the same mother glass, right? But they're somehow making the displays 8K resolution instead of 4K. So how does all that work? The same mother glass, but different resolutions and different screen sizes. I don't know.
So it's a really interesting thing to think about. It's pretty complex, and there are different manufacturing methods, and I am not an expert in any of them. So please do not take the sort of general things that I'm about to say as like the absolute truth on this. This is a real wide overview from someone who doesn't fully understand it, but the parts that I do understand, largely what they're doing right now with like quantum dot displays, it's what they call colloidal chemistry, which is just you actually suspend something in, kind of a fluid, and that gets injected into something and it spreads itself out evenly. That's what they're doing with like quantum dots. So they get these layers and they inject it in there, and how densely they pack the quantum dots relates to how small and close together the pixels are in that type of display. In OLEDs, they're using an evaporative process. So again, they're coating the mother glass with a layer of the things that will eventually turn into the OLED subpixels, and then they evaporate the liquid away from it, and those things are now deposited onto that mother glass, again, depending on the density that they, injected that originally liquid form into it. There's also methods where they're like literally picking and placing individual little subpixels on there with tiny little microscopic sized tweezers, essentially. That's how micro LEDs are put together at this point. And then there are other systems where things get etched. Some of the older LCD technologies were that way. They would etch the pattern on there. All of these different methods mean that you can set up a certain section of this large piece of mother glass that you've created. You just alter the density of the liquid that you're either evaporating or spreading, or you more tightly space the etching, or you use an inkjet printer to actually deposit things where you want them, or these tiny little microscopic tweezers to pick in place. So that's how they can do it. You're starting with this one big substrate, and then you section off portions of it and do these things.
And the issue is, in order to have a 90-inch emissive display, you have to start with glass that's that big, and nobody has glass that's that big. Therefore, the maximum you could do is this the width maximum, basically, of the glass that comes off, or the usable glass that comes off. A lot of times when you're rolling out glass, or because I used to work at a glass plant. My dad used to work at the automotive industrial. He was in glass plant when I was a kid, so I worked there one summer, and this glass comes rolling off of the line, and the ends of it are always not usable.
That's
you usually cut those off and get it to the right size. So that's the maximum height, if you think of it that way, height of the screen, since the screens are wider than they are high. So no matter what, you cannot go unless you're going to start printing out 2.35 to 1 screens. God help us. But as long as it's 16 by 9, the height that's as big as it can get. So when they're saying, oh, we've got we're making a new plant with a glass that can put out 77 inches, what they're saying is the glass that comes off, it can come off at the right quality so that we can have a 77-inch diagonal screen that comes off there. And then we can also cut it into something smaller.
And they have definitely talked about how, through refinement of the manufacturing process, like if you're talking about taking one big sheet of glass and turning it into 6 or 7 individual smaller displays within there, well, there's some gap in between each of those, right? And there's the edges of that original thing. Like Tom says, those parts become unusable. And through refinements, they're able to start making, the gaps between each panel that they cut. Well, they can cut that more precisely and have less waste material. The edges can, they can cut closer to the edge so that there's less waste material. That's why instead of a 75-inch, now it's a 77-inch. They refined it and managed to squeeze another 2 inches out of there. It's that type of thing that's going on.
Yeah. And a lot of that time, that waste just ends up getting crushed and thrown right back in and into the... they just melt it right back down and put it back through. I don't know with OLEDs and some of these other things if there's impurities that they're introduced during it that is part of the process, so they can't reuse it. But generally speaking, like with automotive and industrial glass, if something came off it wasn't right, they would just crush it and throw it back into the thing and say, "Try again, dude." Lee Overstreet I guess we'll probably be here next week. Leah, it's been pointed out that no theater in North America is able to play back Ang Lee's Gemini Man the way it was actually shot and finished in 3D, 4K resolution at 120 frames per second. It says 14 Dolby Cinemas can show it in 3D at 120 frames per second, but only 2K resolution. And quite a few theaters, including IMAX, can show it in 3D at 4K, but only at 60 frames per second. And then, of course, the home release on Ultra HD Blu-ray won't have 3D and will be limited to this because, of course,
that's the format.
So what are our thoughts about using a format that essentially no one can actually experience and having no way of showing the movie as it was intended at home? Great. Make your movie whatever floats your boat. And then, you buy yourself the specialized equipment it takes so you can be the only one that watches it. I bet that guy's got the ceiling all of his speakers with his stupid lifeguard chair. I bet he can watch it at 120 frames per second, 4K, 3D. I bet he can do it.
There are some theaters not in North America, in other parts of the world like South Korea, where they do have the ability to show it at the full thing, 4K resolution, 3D, 120 frames per second. Such theaters do exist. Strangely, they pointed out in the article where they were writing about this how they actually demonstrated this at a theater that had been tricked out in Los Angeles to show it at the full thing, but they never used that for actual commercial purposes. They just tricked it out.
They probably brought in the equipment. And then,
That's right. It was kind of a specialized one-time thing that they did. So it does exist. But I mean, honestly, this is... I don't think it's like a waste or anything like that because... Yes, it's ahead of the infrastructure that we have right now. But it's kind of saying you go beyond today's widely available capabilities, much like the format that has been created for 4K and 8K. Those formats can hold more colors and go to brighter nit levels than any display right now can actually show you. But that isn't a reason to say, well, we shouldn't even have that in the format. We're saying one day we'll get there. So the format is ahead of the practical playback nature. So this is a case where one day we will have theaters and home displays that can show Gemini Man the way it was shot. In fact, they might exceed the way it was shot, and that content will be sitting there waiting for us.
Well, and not only that, if it's only shown a couple of places and directors and content creators go out there to see it specifically to get as a tech demo, well, then if they get excited about it, then of course, I've seen the previews for Gemini, man. It just really doesnn't look like it needs all this.
Well,
it seems like a plot that's not so lame, but maybe it's great movie that's ever been. I don't know. Maybe it's some sort of transformative experience, and this is just the cherry on the cake that is going to be the world's best movie. It looks lame, but at least it'll look lame in 3D, 4K, 120 frames per second. But, if people get excited about it, then yes, it will come. They will make it happen. We'll see.
And I mean, the Avatar movies are all in that too. That's the way they've been shot. The Avatar movies are that as well.
Has he started filming the rest of those?
Oh
things
yeah,
yet?
he's been working on it for a couple of years now. Yeah, he's doing like
I feel like some of his actors are going
4 or 5 of them all at once,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like some of his actors are going to die if he doesn't hurry up and get this thing on with. Not die, but like age out of their roles. It's like you started and you look like this, and now
we'll just digitally redo their
7 years of hard
digitally
drinking
redo their faces. It'll be fine. Yep.
Oh, God help us all. Rob G, this is not you. This is a different Rob. He says we've talked a bit about input lab for gamers. And most TV and projector reviews these days include a mention of how many milliseconds of lag the display has. But what about AV receivers? If you are connecting your gaming system to a receiver that is passing the video through your TV, is the receiver potentially adding any lag? Is anybody publishing measurements to show whether AV receivers introduce additional latency, and if so, how much? Yes, they can. They can 100%. They've done it to me. So the way to combat this is to turn off any video processing that's within your receiver. So sometimes we tell you to turn it on if you want to and have it do nothing, but still turn it on in order to get menus on your screen.
Or to when you press the volume up and down to have that show up as a graphic on your screen.
Right.
Yeah, because if you don't have the video processing activated, not necessarily doing any actual scaling or manipulation of the signal, but just active, the video chip inside the receiver active, then very often it won't put up, like that volume display, for example. But yeah, if you turn all of that completely off, which pretty much all AV receivers let you do, then at that point it is very much just a true pass-through of the signal, as though you just connected 2 ends of an HDMI cable together and, there it goes. The other thing you could do...
I always had a problem with Rock Band and latency going through everything because timing was such a huge part of that game. We had to really be very, very careful about, any sort of latency that we had. And every time I got a new projector for testing or whatever, it was always like, okay, we got to reset everything. And, I got to go with the drum thing and make sure that the drums are synced up. And
the other thing you could potentially look at doing is turning off the HDMI lip sync setting. Because if there is going to be any latency introduced into the HDMI signal, it would be because it's attempting to synchronize it with the audio section. So if you turn off the HDMI auto lip sync, that is the other thing. Now, if you do all that, it shouldn't introduce any additional latency. But I don't know of a resource. It might exist. If it does, it's some person doing it on a forum, so that might exist somewhere. But I don't know of a professional website or something who's keeping a spreadsheet of AV receivers and how much input lag they introduce into the video signal. It'd be a tough thing to test because there are so many variables. And
once you turn all that stuff off, it's essentially zero.
That's right.
It should be essentially zero. It would be testing it with the lip sync on, but lip sync, of course, is adjustable as well. So, it may or may not. I mean, I don't know that there's anywhere you can see this, but if you're worried about it for your projector, the key is to turn all that stuff off
inside the AV receiver. Yes.
Vince. Both of Vince's parents have some hearing loss. His mom's is worse, and if she's watching TV on her own, she'll turn the volume on their 65-inch Sony X900E all the way up to max, which is too loud to bear for anyone else, including Vince's dad, even though he has some hearing loss too, probably from the TV at max. Sorry, Vince. Vince tried hooking up the Yamaha YAS-207 soundbar, but that still wasn't enough, and it didn't solve the issue of his mom needing the volume level much higher than everyone else. Naturally, he thought of headphones, but his mom absolutely will not wear them. Well, you see, you got a problem here. The problem's your mom. So Vince was thinking maybe he could set up a pair of speakers on the table right next to her, but they definitely don't have long cables stretching across the room. So are there any wireless speakers we could suggest that would let her listen to them at close proximity while everyone else can listen to the Yamaha soundbar? Boy, this is going to sound weird in this room. You can do. There's so many wireless speaker connect solutions. What SVS has one. Is it
Prime Wireless? Yep.
That's not the one I was. Is that the Prime Wireless? Yeah. Outlaw Audio has one.
Yeah.
As well.
Well, that's just a transmitter receiver, not the speakers themselves.
Right. You would need that stuff, but I would get like speakers that had their own volume on them. So something like computer speakers, like the Audio Engine ones I have, would be good. Yeah. But that way you could just plug them into a receiver, and you wouldn't have to add anything else. They still have to be plugged in. So I assume that because whenever you tell me about somebody's parents' house, I think they've got an old couch that's sitting right on the wall, and the TV's across the room from them, and there's knickknacks everywhere. So I imagine there'll have to be two speakers right to her left or right, if she's sitting on the end of the couch, or right in front of her on the coffee table. But there are going to have to be wires.
Yeah, power cables. There will have to be power cables at the very least. But yeah, the thing to be very concerned about here to me is, I mean, obviously, even if these speakers are right up close to her, they're still probably going to be turned up pretty darn loud by the description he's giving of how severe her hearing loss is, which means you don't want that sound, which will still be audible to everyone else, and the sound that is still coming from the Yamaha soundbar, to be out of synchronization at all, because then you'll get an echo. It'll sound like an echo.
It will be. And it would talk about latency.
Yes.
These things, absolutely add latency because they're transmitting. It has to be transmitted over the air and then both encoded and decoded at either side. So there is going to be latency there. So I think everybody's going to end up with speakers.
That is one way. But what I would point you to is AVRant. Has some nice systems that use aptX low latency, and it is darn near instantaneous. I've used this myself, haven't had to adjust the lip sync setting for the other speakers that aren't on this aptX low latency system at all. Even though, yes, I think it is about 4 milliseconds difference, that is not enough for you to perceive it even as the slightest bit of echo. So they have these ones. These are nice and small, a $60 set of a transmitter and a receiver unit using the aptX low latency. They call it the AVRant lock. They come, as the name implies, locked to one another, so no other signals interfere, and they just send between the two of them. Now, you would then, on the TV side, plug in the 3.5 millimeter output from your TV into the transmitting unit of this aptX low latency from AVRant, and then the receiving unit, you would plug that into a pair of self-powered speakers. So, I mean, these are really small. They're powered by USB. They actually have a battery built in, so even if you need to move them around or something, it'll keep working off of battery power for 6 hours is what they claim. So then it's just a matter of which self-powered speakers do you connect them to. Lots of good choices out there. I very much agree with Tom's suggestion of Audio Engine. Those can play very loud, very clearly, without being...
And they're very
small. So those check all the boxes. SVS's Prime wireless speakers could be an option just as self-powered speakers, but they're considerably larger. Don't make any mistake about how large they are, but very good sound quality. There's also Klipsch's self-powered monitors that they sell, which if you're talking about something that can play loud, Klipsch's self-powered monitors, like almost all Klipsch speakers, that can get the job done on there. There's the R51 PMs and the smaller R41 PMs. So all of these, I wouldn't necessarily be making use of any of their built-in wireless if they have it. You'd still need a transmitter somewhere to send the signal anyway. So I would just go with this AVRant aptX low latency as the transmitter and receiver, and just connect it to a pair of self-powered speakers.
Yeah. And I kind of understand where your mom's coming from with not wanting to wear headphones.
Sure.
Feel like you're not part of the group or whatever's going on. But, this is a really hard thing to get around. I mean, I understand she has got hearing loss, and I don't know what the other solutions are as far as maybe, hearing aids, or, I imagine she probably already has
Yeah.
that stuff going on, but having stuff blaring into your ears certainly can't be, it kind of feels like there should be a solution that's on your mom that you could fix. Because if not, I could see why everybody else would be like, well, I'm just going to go watch TV in the
Right.
kitchen.
Well, interestingly,
I can't take it.
like with today's hearing aids, my dad went through this. Lots of hearing aids offer a system where you connect a little transmitter to your TV or sound
Yeah.
system, and it sends the
Yeah.
audio directly to the hearing aids.
See, that's, to me, seems like would be the best solution.
But there's a problem with those, which is that they have latency. Now, you could look for one that specifically talks about, because they don't use aptics. It's always a proprietary signal that goes to hearing aids. So, your iPhone has this as well, right? iPhones have a hearing aid output that puts the sound directly into compatible hearing aids. So you could look for one. I don't know for sure. I would hope by now somebody is making one that is low latency, but hearing aids are one of those things where it's practically, a scam at this. They're so overpriced, and the technology isn't nearly kept up.
That's because it's all
be.
A lot of it's a lot of it's paid for by insurance.
That's
so the
right.
minute that you start being able to charge insurance, and all of a sudden everything costs a bajillion % more than it actually should.
So it's something you could potentially look for if you do find some hearing aids that offer this, and they specifically say that they have a low latency so that you don't get that weird echo effect between the TV speakers that are still playing or the sound bar and what's coming into the.
If she can't hear the sound bar anyways, you just turn the sound bar down enough so that she can't hear it and everybody else
but
can.
I bet it still has to be pretty loud, because his dad has some hearing loss, just not enough that he needs it all the way up at max. I bet it's still pretty loud.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Get them both the same hearing aids.
Get rid of
get rid of the sound bar altogether.
Yeah.
I don't know. We're spitballing over here. I know that these things exist too, because my church just implemented I want to say it's called Blue Note or Blue something or whatever, that is the same thing, so that you get it beamed right into your hearing aid. He asked, could we talk a bit about the latest PlayStation 4 update that added new settings for HDR? Any tips for setting it up correctly? Nope. I have nothing. Good. Let's go on.
So this is Sony's attempt.
I don't have a PlayStation 4. So
right.
I don't care.
This is Sony's attempt to start implementing some of what they proposed as part of the HDR gaming interest group, the HGIG. So this is where, instead of the game output being a fixed thing that the display then has to tone map, this is where you actually inform the game system how the display tone maps, and then the game adjusts its output to match the tone mapping of the display. So it's a little bit of a reverse thing. The fixed variable is now the display, and the game system adapts to it. That's the way that this issue. So it's a setting that just shows up in your display and sound settings. It says HDR adjustment or adjust HDR, something like that. And it actually just gives you 3 quite simple test patterns with very simple instructions, which is just a full white screen with a little HDR logo on it. And it says, adjust this until you can barely see the letters HDR anymore. And then it gives you a small white window within a big black screen. And again, there's the letters HDR printed within that small white window. And it says, again, adjust this. All you're doing is pressing left and right until you can barely see the letters HDR. And then it's a full black screen with the letters HDR, and you adjust it until you can barely see the letters HDR. So all you do is click it up until it completely vanishes, and then click it back 1 or 2 clicks until you can barely see those letters again. And what it's now doing is setting the full frame average light level. That's the full white screen. Then it's setting the for like a 10% window type of screen, because a lot of HDR displays can show a small window brighter than a full white screen. That's super common. And then the black level as well. The instructions are pretty straightforward. It's not a difficult adjustment to do at all. It's important that your ambient light levels are where they're going to be while you're playing this game. So this is something you might need to adjust at different times of the day. If you play with sunlight coming in and you play at night, you'll want to readjust it because it's not going to look completely perfect if you pick one setting and leave it there. But more than that, the games all have to be patched to actually use it. So right now, No Man's Sky is the only game that works with this. The one and only. And it's hilarious because there are people on YouTube posting these things. They're like, look at this HDR game. Look at how different it is. I'm like, no, it doesn't. It doesn't look any different because nothing changed because that game doesn't support it yet. It's like pure placebo effect for these people. So,
No Man's Sky, but that was that dumpster fire of a game that came out with all these promises and none of the things were true. Isn't that the one?
It's
since been patched.
It's been updated a lot. That's right.
Oh, I'm sorry. I refuse to support any game. Well, I don't buy games. That's, I guess, apparently not true. Like yesterday, I bought a Switch.
Whoa.
So I didn't actually buy it. My 10-year-old son has been saving his money for months, and finally got enough money to, after allowances and birthdays and everything else, to buy a Switch and a game. So now we have a Switch, which I hooked up yesterday.
Sweet.
And yeah, it's a thing.
Get the Goose. You got to get the Untitled Goose Game.
Yeah, Goose Game, please.
I love that game.
He'll get.
It's very short.
He's got Mario Kart,
okay.
And I think he'll probably get Super Smash Brothers, but we'll see. I'm not encouraging him to buy anything. So, but he's now saving his money for more games. We'll do one more question, then we're going to be done. Okay. Carl and Jonathan both emailed us to say that The Guardian in the UK wrote an article entitled "Deafening Cinema Sound is Ruining Films." They use Hugh Grant's recent Twitter complaints, because that's apparently news, about his experience watching The Joker as a springboard to write about volume levels in cinemas and how some safety groups are now recommending the average level be limited to 80 dB instead of 85 dB. They also touch upon the issue of distortion versus outright sound pressure level, and how most of the discussion is about average SPL and peaks, but not much is being said about background and ambient noise levels. So what's our take? Are theaters too loud? In Jonathan's case, he says that when he and his wife use his home theater, so that 50% of the audience agrees with Hugh Grant that it's too loud.
You can guess who the 50% are.
Yeah, I can guess
out of Jonathan and his wife.
So yes, there are. I think my wife thinks my cinema is too loud when we're watching home theater, but or when I'm watching a movie, especially a Marvel movie. But she doesn't think it's too loud when we're watching anything else, because I don't turn it up very nearly as loud. But distortion is really the issue here, more often than not. Theaters are okay. I'm going to talk about IMAX second. Most theaters, they're mostly fine, and I mostly wish they would turn it up a little bit. But the times I have not enjoyed myself in a theater has been because there is clearly a speaker that's having an issue, just a torn woofer, some sort of distortion that's going on. That's very, very clearly what's happening. The fact is that even though these are very big rooms, you're sharing walls with other theaters that are playing movies that oftentimes are still coming through, especially if there's a lot of bass happening. So you do have to consider that when you're setting your volume levels. IMAX, on the other hand, I often find are just like trying to piss me off. I'm like, come on, guys. I don't need a headache this bad. And I really want to see this movie. I'm excited about it. And I love it that you love it loud like I love it loud, but you love it too loud. And you need to turn it down a little bit. So in those cases, I would agree. But generally speaking, as long as you're not having distortion, as long as you're not having any issues with the speakers, 85 dB, first of all, the difference between 80 and 85 dB is not going to be something I think most people are really going to notice all that much.
Well, it's about the standard is what they're talking about, saying that the 85 dB standard is an older standard that was based upon older research, and that the newer research says it might not be a bad idea to limit our exposure to sound pressure levels anywhere above 80 to shorter lengths of time than the old standards.
Well, and our movies are also getting longer too, since those standards came out. A 90-minute movie was a movie.
Right.
There was no
And sometimes the action sequences
200-minute
carry
movies
on for a much longer duration with higher average sound levels over a longer duration than movies, from long ago type of thing that had short action sequences. I mean, for me, the experience in going from theater to theater, even like each individual theater within one given Cineplex, right, can be significantly different. Some of them I find too quiet. I'm like, this needs to be louder, and it's just a matter of either they kind of skimped on the audio system or that's just the way it happens to be set up. There are certain, I know enough of my local theaters to know the particular auditorium within the Cineplex that I like, and I know where I want to sit and book my advance ticket with reserved seating, and I know the ones that I like, but it isn't a super consistent experience for me. And it's kind of funny because this is going back to like the whole reason George Lucas started the THX program with the release of Empire Strikes Back, because he was like, I want people to actually hear my movie the way I intended for them to hear it, and it's so inconsistent from theater to theater. I don't think it's as bad as it was back then. I don't think the difference from theater to theater is as great as it was back then, but it's still...
Well, the same thing happened with like Jurassic Park came out too. It was the same sort of deal where it's like you couldn't show this movie if you didn't have this quality of speaker and subwoofer and surround sound and everything else. You weren't allowed. You weren't allowed to even rent the movie or, whatever, lease the movie, however they call it. So, yeah, I mean, to that, I totally agree with Rob. I saw Air Force One, and we drove for a special Dolby, surround sound, because that back then, or DTS, whatever it was, theater to go, because that's how far back that was, and it was just surround sound, and the entire movie was in stereo. It was very low. It was kind of very hard to hear, and the last 5 minutes of the movie you could almost hear the click of the switch as somebody went, oh, this is supposed to be in surround sound, and they flicked the switch, and all of a sudden everything sounded great. I mean, it was that dramatic of a difference. So I agree with Rob. I mean, there's some cinemas that you just spend the whole time wishing they would do something, and then there's others you're like, okay, seriously, like for real.
I mean, that last Transformers movie that I ever saw in a movie theater, and never will again until they change something. But I mean, that's the first time in a long time where I actually had my fingers covering my ears, because I was actually worried for my hearing. Yeah. Because that movie was so long and so loud the entire way through that I was like, it's painful. I'm worried about my hearing. But that has not been my experience at all across the vast majority of movies I've seen. Like I say, a lot of the theaters I go to, I actually wish they would turn it up. So I don't think you can take this one complaint of Hugh Grant's one experience at one particular auditorium seeing one particular movie. I mean, I saw Joker, had no problem with the audio level, but I went to one of the theaters that I know I like their sound system, how it's set up, and to me it was great. It was exactly where I would have it if I were setting it myself. So I don't think it's a completely generalized, this applies to every auditorium everywhere type of thing, but certainly I agree, some of them are not tuned right.
Yeah, up or down. I think when I saw Resident Evil, I saw the first Resident Evil movie, there was a torn woofer on one of the side surrounds. And whenever a sound would hit there, I would just look up at that speaker and just like, you son of a... That's right. It's just like, just growl at it. Like, oh, this is so bad and distracting. It's so bad. So, I mean, and honestly, just one last point. What you may think as a theater is too loud is actually them turning it up to the same loudness that you may have heard in another theater and saw it was fine. But their system is not up to snuff, and they're adding so much distortion, and that's what you're finding objectionable. Not, I said objectionable, right? I think I did, but that's what you're having a problem with. You're having a problem with that distortion. That distortion will bother you far more at far lower volumes than actual volume will bother you.
Ironically, it isn't always the bigger theater where you need higher output levels. Very often the biggest auditorium, they've spent the money to put in the good sound system. It's very often the physically smaller auditorium, and they kind of skimped on the sound system, and that's the one that's distorting. I've certainly had that
That's right.
experience.
So who we got left,
We have
Rob?
Brian F. and Brannon M. I also put Sean W.'s question, but his actually came in on Monday, and I don't usually do that. I thought we might get that far down the list, but we didn't, so it's all moot. You guys are on the list. It'll be answered next week with a guest co-host.
Let's thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank our 86 patrons over at patreon.com.
Indeed, that's patreon.com/AVRant Podcast. If you'd like to sign up, think of it as an automatic monthly donation or a voluntary subscription. Thanks to our 86 patrons over there, including Brian F., who is one of our patrons, and let us know that he's one of our patrons.
I also want to thank Bill for confirming Mike's correction about the 20 amp circuits for last week. For those of you on YouTube who are watching me, I keep looking over your shoulder.
Oh, they can't see you. Your video is dead over here. It never
my video's
came
dead?
back.
Oh, good. Okay. Hey, Violet, cut it out. I keep looking at the dog. If I had known that, I would have picked my nose. I've been in the pick my nose.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's black on my screen anyway. I assume that's what's being fed out to YouTube. But you shall be a logo for large portions of this podcast episode.
Whee! Logo.
I'll have to put that back in manually. I'm doing the extra work to make you a logo.
I could be a black box.
By the way, thanks, Bill, for
AV
correcting me. I'm going to keep cutting Tom off so we can't end this podcast.
I can see that. I'm trying to stop the podcast. I'm hungry. I haven't eaten yet today. For AV Rant, I'm Tom
and
Andry.
I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.